I originally wasn't planning to do a video about the superior right Cray Elemental cards, but then Bushiroad decided to drop another 2 Cray Elemental support cards. So here we are now.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to an extra edition of Cardfight Update. Today we're gonna talk about Cray Elementals, as Bushiroad revealed 4 new Cray Elemental support cards in the last couple of days that basically showcase to us how this new Cray Elemental build is gonna run, how it works, and to top it all off, how it potentially can be incorporated in all the other clans. And the insane part is that we saw the new order card for premium as well. So without further ado, let's jump right into these cards, because there's a lot of interesting things to talk about and basically explain what's gonna happen after this set drops for premium. So let's start off with the 2 cards that were revealed a couple of days ago, and we start off with the grade 2, that is Cray Elemental Mowark, and her ability is act on Vanguard and Vanguard Circle. Once per turn, if you have 4 or more units with no continuous act and auto abilities, so again it's looking at vanilla cards, cost countable as 1, and search your deck for up to 1 Thundering Elemental Barry Girin, write it as stand, and shuffle your deck. If you wrote, you may turn a Storm Elemental Cyclone from your G-Zone face up. So this card allows you to superior write into the grade 3 of the Cray Elemental deck, and then also flip an Elemental Cyclone face up in your G-Zone. This is pretty good for the vanilla deck, as for 1, it allows you to write up consistently and even superior write onto your opponent while they're still grade 1, but also it searches out the grade 3 from deck, so it's even more right consistency. And the fact that you flip up one of the Cyclone cards in your G-Zone, it will power up your columns, as for to be able to use this ability, you need to have a field filled with vanilla cards. So that means you're gonna get value off of Cyclone's passive G-Zone ability as well. So that is already really good. But if we take a look at the grade 3, this ability really flows nicely into the grade 3. So here we have the grade 3 Thunder Elemental Barry Girin, and its abilities are Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost soul +1, look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 2 unit cards without continuous act and auto abilities from among them, put them into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this basically allows you to up the consistency of the cards like the grade 2 and even this grade 3, as we're going to see with the second ability. And it also allows you to basically plus for free. Cause a Soul Blast and potentially +2 is not bad. And it synergizes with what the deck wants to do, as you can then keep flooding the board with more vanilla cards if you're up against a control clan that keeps retiring or removing your units. But then we get to the second ability, which is act on Vanguard Circle. If you have 4 or more rearguards without continuous act and auto abilities, cost countable as 1, strike a Storm Elemental Cyclone on your Vanguard Circle from face up in your G-Zone. So what's different about this superior stride effect is that it doesn't stride cards from face down, it strides them from face up. And that is pretty huge for this vanilla deck, as you want to have all your Cyclones face up to get the most value out of it. But after you put all 4 copies face up, you basically don't get value off of that card anymore. And with the grade 2 already excessively flipping them face up, it can be really awkward to keep striding into this. The fact that this card can stride them from face up means you will have endless targets for that specific stride, and you can keep striding into it. And this has 2 factors to it. First off, it allows you to superior stride within any situation. So what you can do is, when you ride up to the grade 2, you can potentially superior ride into this card and then immediately superior stride into the potential of Cyclone, as you already flipped 1 face up with the grade 2. So if you have 2 Counterblast, you can basically go from grade 1 immediately into a stride unit. That's pretty huge. But also a thing is that it allows you to stride in any situation, because if you don't have a stride fodder or a grade 3 to discard, or every of your Cyclones already face up, you can utilize this ability to stride for a counterblast. And probably the entire deck isn't really going to utilize Soul or Counterblast because most of it's going to be vanilla, so you can spend all the Counterblast to keep striding into Cyclones and get the most bang for your buck. So yeah, this is really nice. But I've seen a lot of other people speculating about these two cards as a superior right engine for any other archetype, for any other clan. I don't really see this happening, because the problem is with both cards is that, for one, it costs excessive amount of Counterblast, and in Premium, damage denying is the all rage, so you're probably not gonna be able to utilize this. But another big issue is that both these cards demands that you have 4 vanilla cards onto the field. Most decks don't have the luxury or the room to actually play enough vanilla cards in their grade lineups to make this skill viable. And then besides that, you need to run this grade 3 and this grade 2. How many decks actually have the room for that? The only deck that might potentially can pull this off is Katrina. And the only reason for that is that they have these token generators, and that can basically be seen as vanilla cards themselves, because you can call a Pensy Musketeer Sylvia and then create a token and call it on top of the Sylvia, and then the Sylvia was actually a pseudo vanilla card as you generate a vanilla card on the spot where you just called it. Within tokens, I can potentially see this happening. But then again, you still need to run the grade 2 and the grade 3, which will lower the consistency of the overall token game plan. So if people are actually trying to pull this into any other build, I think there's probably going to be a janky, gimmicky thing than actually a viable strategy. And if it's going to happen, it's probably going to be a very unique build that is min-maxing all the possibilities to still get value out of all your other cards. Although another interesting thing about this card is, and especially the grade 2, is it flips a card in your G-Zone on grade 2. So if you just run the grade 2, you can potentially call your triggers, as every deck runs triggers. But then again, if you're willing to call 4 vanilla triggers to the field to potentially superior right or stride, you can ask yourself the question, do you actually get enough value to win the game on that play? Because you just discard your entire defense value and probably your hand. So how much value are you going to get off of it, and can you win the game? Because probably next turn, if your opponent can ride up to grade 3 or stride against you, you're probably dead. But the interesting about that grade 2 is because it flips a G-Zone face up in the early game, you can potentially go into a GB3 stride as a first stride or utilize flip G-Guardians immediately right off the bat. That's a huge thing. Also, another thing is that you can potentially utilize your GB skills before you actually stride. So that could have some impact, but I don't think the grade 2 is a good fit for that. Because if you actually want to go that route, we got better options since of today. Because today we got 2 more cards that were revealed. So let's talk about the new Cray Elemental, that is this grade 1, Rain Elemental Zazen. And its ability is auto Vanguard the Vanguard circle. When placed, costs Soul Blast 1 and call up to 2 unit cards with no continuous act and auto abilities from your hand to the Vanguard circle. If you call 2, turn up to 1 face down Storm Elemental Cyclone from your G-Zone face up and draw 2 cards. Alright, so first, in the Cray Elemental deck itself, this is huge because it flips up another Storm Elemental Cyclone in the early game. So this allows you on grade 1 already start to swing in with powerful columns. As when you ride this thing, for example, you Soul Blast 1, call 2 vanilla cards, and then you flip a Cyclone, so those vanilla cards will gain an additional 5k power, and you draw 2 cards again. So you actually plus 2 off of this. Because yes, it's a cycle in your hand, but you call those units, so you actually get value out of them. It's not like putting them to soul or discarding them or putting them back to deck. No, you actually call them. So if you already were planning to call them, this is a direct plus 2 and a G flip for a Soul Blast on grade 1. That's pretty big. But also it's synergized with the grade 3, as the grade 3 unplay skill potentially gets 2 vanilla cards from the top 7. Then you can call this thing and call those 2 vanilla cards. And that means you only need 2 more vanilla cards to activate the grade 3 skill, because you can call this behind the Vanguard. You have still 4 spots left. You call 2 vanilla cards, call 2 more, and the grade 3's main skill to stride into a Cyclone from face up is then active. But because we have the grade 2, the grade 1 that flips now it's very likely or very possible that we can flip all 4 Cyclones before we actually go into Grade 3. So the first strike turn can be insanely powerful with all these vanilla cards. Because don't forget, we can potentially restand these guys. So that's already pretty strong. But if we take a look outside of the whole Cray Elemental deck, now it's more plausible that we can tag this card in any other build to allow us to access Generation Break early as Grade 1. As calling 2 vanilla cards is a lot more accessible than calling 4 and then paying a counterless. Because a counterless can be denied, calling 4 is a lot more costly, and this also draws back into those cards. So there's a more argument to call 2 triggers and then draw back into 2 cards, as this card can potentially also help with a right consistency as you draw into 2 new cards that can potentially be your Grade 2 or your Grade 3. And the fact that it flips another G-Zone card face up that's a Cyclone, it makes your vanilla cards, potentially your triggers, into 10k boosters, which is really good for an early game aggressive play. And Generation Break is active, and the same argument for the Grade 2 that we can stride first into a Generation Break free stride or utilize our flip G-Guardians right at the bat is still in effect here. So this could actually be a good tech option for certain decks. But there is something potentially even better, as they revealed the new order card. And before we go into the order card, I'm somewhat annoyed by the fact that they already revealed the order card, as I had a new video ready to be released probably today or otherwise after Tuesday, where I discussed and speculated about the potential of this order card. And for some reason I was really close with the effect, because here's the clip. So for this Premium Collection order card, there are 2 main routes they can take. Either this card is gonna interact with the G-Zone, so it could do something with the G-Guardians or the Stride cards, or it could interact with the upcoming Cray Elemental deck. And the reason why I think it's one of these 2 directions is, if it's neither, then what's the point of making a Premium Collection exclusive order card, as it's probably gonna then interact with something that also is plausible in Standard. So they could just have splashed it into a Standard set. Because it's a Premium Collection order, I think they're gonna interact with a Premium exclusive mechanic, so it makes sense that they put it into a Premium Collection set. So for the G-Zone aspect, what I think is very plausible is that we're gonna see a order card that allows us to flip a G-Zone card face up in the early game. So we might get a Grade 1 or the Grade 2 order card that flips a random G-Zone card face up, and that allows us to do a couple of things. It allows us to utilize our Generation Break cards from the G era in the early game. This allows the Premium Collection card pool to diverse a bit, as we're starting to see more and more Standard cards to flood the decks and push out all the older cards, as Standard is basically power creeping everything out. But if we can utilize the Generation Break cards earlier in the early game on Grade 1 or Grade 2, then they might have a fighting chance to actually have room into these new builds. So it might diverse the card pool quite a bit. Another aspect that it allows us to do is utilize Generation Break free strides as first strides, or it allows us to utilize G-Guardians, that are the flip G-Guardians, as the first G-Guardians, because now we have Generation Break 1 already active once we can activate our G-Guardians. So it might change that dynamic as well. And the reason why I think it's very plausible is that we already see this effect within the Cray Elementals themselves, as the Grade 2 allows us to flip the Storm Elemental Cyclone face up for its effect, as that will empower the Cray Elemental deck. This type of effect for the order card will not only benefit every clan in Vanguard, but it mainly will benefit the Cray Elemental deck, as it allows us to flip the Cyclone face up and then utilize it for the Grade 3 skill if we didn't activate the Grade 2, so it's increased the consistency of the build even more. Now that we talked about all the options for the G-Zone aspect of the order effect, let's take a look at what it could do for the Cray Elemental deck. And there are 2 main options that I think is possible. One of them is that it will turn every card onto the field, and probably for the entire turn, into a vanilla card. And the reason why I think that is a possible thing is that the entire deck revolves around having vanilla cards. But we see the Grade 2 and the Grade 3, which are basically essential cards for that deck that aren't the vanilla cards. So you're running 4 copies of both cards, probably this new order as well, which in itself will decrease the consistency of the build. So you want to increase the consistency of getting enough vanillas onto the board and also drive checking them with cyclones to activate all your effects. How they can do that is by turning everything into a vanilla card for that turn. So basically that's the perfect way to increase the consistency of everything. But it could be a little bit too broken if that would be the case, as every clan can get access to that and certain clans can just break under that effect and make it way too powerful. So another direction, another route they can take is make it as a searcher. And it is basically similar to what we've seen with the Majesty Lord Blaster order card that searches out the Blaster Dark, Blaster Blade, and a Majesty Lord Blaster, that it can check if you're sitting at a Cray Elemental Vanguard, and if you do, you can search out 1 or 2 vanilla cards from your deck and add it to your hand or just call them to the field. So it increases the consistency through that. It increases the consistency of the grade 2 and the grade 3, but it won't increase the consistency of Cyclone's resetting effect. But it does for the power gain. So they can take that approach. So yeah, as you can see, I was right on the money there, because here we have Tempest Sphere, and its ability is cost count +1 and turn a card from your G-Zone face up. Look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 2 cards without continuous act and auto abilities from among them, put them into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So in the Cray Elemental aspect itself, this synergizes with the grade 1, as it can potentially search out again 2 vanilla cards that you can then call with Zazen and then draw into more cards, and you can basically go from that. Also, this combines really nicely with the grade 3, as it can potentially fetch your 4 vanilla cards that you need, then stride into your Cyclone. And it turns another G-Zone card face up, so that can be another Cyclone you flip with this. But that's basically for the vanilla deck. For this card to be useful in any other clan, we can only look at this cost. Because the skill that look at the top 7, get vanilla cards, yada yada yada, we don't need that for other clans. Because we don't want to run vanillas, as it decreases the consistency of our builds. The fact that this cost is turn a G-Zone card face up allows this order card to be played in any deck that wants to turbo out the G-Zone or have access to more GB for different skills. As I explained in the clip, this allows us from turn 1 to have access to Generation Break units. As if we get a Counterblast and we go into our grade 2 turns, we can activate the skill, flip something face up, and then call our Generation Break units. And this allows Generation Break units to be a lot more powerful, as we can use them a lot sooner. This also means that our grade 2 turns, or grade 2 gaming, for a lot of clans suddenly becomes a lot more potent, as they might not have the good standard support, but their Generation Break support might actually be solid enough. So this can change the entire landscape for that aspect. But another thing is that because this card can flip up anything in G-Zone, certain builds can profit off of this quite nicely. Because for one, you can flip up anything, so you can access to your GB free strides and your flip G Guardians, just like all the other things. But for example, something like ZTB with Heritage can utilize this because you can just flip up a ZTB stride. Something like a Turbo GB8 build for Hellheart 8 or other clans that we've seen can then suddenly utilize this to be even better. Another thing for those GB8 Turbo builds or even ZTB, this card also looks at the top 7 and fetches 2 unit cards without a skill. So if you run vanilla heals, you can search out your heals and have 2 G Guardians ready to flip at anything. So this card can change that turbo aspect of premium for a certain build to the next level. And this card can also allow other decks to have an actual GBA turbo strategy, because they can search out their heals, they can flip up their G-Zone more consistently, and they can actually have an edge upon the opponent when they get a Counterblast. The only problem with this card for any deck out there in premium that isn't the Cray Elemental deck is that you're sacrificing a bit of your consistency to run this card, because it's an order card that isn't a unit. It's just to flip up a G-Zone card to potentially access your GB units. And if that's the case, if you run this card to get access to your GB grade 2s or grade 1s, That's a really inconsistent strategy because for one, you need to run those GB units, meaning if you do not draw into discard early game, you have a dead hand the first couple of turns, just like when you played in Jira. That's not what you want to have in Premium right now, because if you have that, you basically lost the game. Another thing is, if you draw into this thing, but you do not draw into your GB units, then you don't get the value out of this. This card will probably be useful in decks that, for one, have the room in their grade 1 slot to maybe run 1 or 2 copies of this. 2, can, for some reason, search out this card on a consistent basis and add them to hand. And 3, has some actual value out of the fact that you can flip cards in your G-Zone. So certain builds that will utilize the amount of cards face up in G-Zone or have specific units face up in G-Zone. Good examples are Turbo 8 builds, or ZTB with the amount of heritage cards, or other cards that get more power or more effects the more cards that are face up in your G-Zone. For example, the Cray Elemental strategy. So if your deck doesn't have one of those 3 options, and preferably all 3, this card will probably don't do much for you. The only thing on the basic level that it will help you is give you access to GB free strides on first stride or utilize Flip G Guardians right off the bat. But then again, it costs you a Counterblast. And Counterblast is a very viable resource. And just wasting Counterblast to flip a G-Zone card face up, it's not really that good of a trade-off if you cannot capitalize on it. Because if that was your only Counterblast, what you're gonna do. But that's basically all the cards that we got today. They were some really interesting cards, as we got 3 new vanilla cards that basically build up the bulk for the entire vanilla engine, and to some extent could be splashed in certain builds in Premium if they have the room to actually play them or not. But I think the most interesting out of all of them is the brand new Order card, which could be big, but it depends if we can utilize it to its maximum capacity, as it could be a trap. Just Counterblast 1 to flip a G-Zone card face up on grade 1, or basically grade 2 when you get the damage, might sound insane. But it could actually be just a dud because you're running a card that actually does nothing. Because the card itself doesn't really do anything. You don't get the immediate value out of flipping a card face up in your G-Zone if you, for one, don't stride, or don't have cards that immediately get benefit from having cards face up in your G-Zone, like Generation Break. But then again, if you run those cards, your deck will become a lot more inconsistent than what we're seeing in Premium right now, and consistency is mainly key to have a successful deck. But that's basically everything for me today. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of this new Cray Elemental engine that we've got. These 4 new cards for any clan, actually, as, yeah, they are really interesting, but at the same time should be analyzed very, very carefully, as they could be very well a noob trap, as it could do nothing actually. But that's something that we will see in the long run once people actually start to experiment with these cards and we see actual results once tournament seasons is gonna continue again. So maybe we get results in 2022. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one.